The morning mist hung thick over the Ukrainian countryside as Sergeant Anya Volkov adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that week. The year was 2022, and the war had been raging for 8 months. Every soldier in her battalion knew about the column, a massive concrete pillar that rose from the center of a strategic bridge, seemingly impossible to hit from any angle that mattered tactically. "Forget about that shot, Volkov," Captain Dmitri had told her just 3 days earlier. "Better snipers than you have tried. The angle is wrong, the distance is extreme, and even if you could hit it, what's the point? It's solid concrete." But Anya had been studying that column for weeks. While other snipers focused on easier targets, she spent hours calculating wind patterns, trajectory angles, and the mathematical precision needed to accomplish what everyone said was impossible. The bridge was crucial. It allowed enemy supply convoys to cross the river safely, protected by the column's strategic position that blocked traditional sniper sight lines. Her commander, Colonel Petrov, had grown tired of her requests to attempt the shot. "You're wasting time and ammunition," he'd bark whenever she brought up her theory about hitting the column in a way that would structurally compromise the bridge. "Focus on confirmed enemy targets, not concrete fantasies." Anya understood their skepticism. At 24, she was one of the youngest snipers in the regiment. Her small frame and quiet demeanor didn't match the intimidating presence of veteran marksmen who had been shooting since before she was born. Many questioned whether she belonged in the sniper unit at all. The bridge column stood roughly 800 meters from her current position, requiring a shot through a narrow gap between two buildings and over the heads of patrolling enemy soldiers. The margin for error was microscopic, missed by even centimeters, and the bullet would strike useless concrete or worse, alert enemies to her position. But Anya had discovered something during her weeks of observation. The column wasn't solid concrete as everyone assumed. Through careful study with her scope, she'd identified a critical weakness, a section where wartime construction had left a gap in the rebar reinforcement. If she could place a specialized round precisely in that location, the structural integrity would fail. "I need armor-piercing rounds," she'd requested from the quartermaster. "For what purpose?" he demanded. "Training," she'd lied, knowing the truth would result in another lecture about impossible shots and wasted resources. The weather conditions had to be perfect for her plan. Wind speed couldn't exceed 5 kilometers per hour, visibility needed to be clear, and enemy patrol timing had to align exactly with her shooting window. She'd been monitoring these variables for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Her fellow snipers treated her obsession with dark humor. "Volkov's going to shoot the moon next," joked Sergeant Mikkel. "Maybe she thinks concrete bleeds." Even her spotter, Private Victor, expressed doubts. "Anya, I support you completely, but this shot? It's not just difficult. It's physically impossible from our current positions. The angle requires us to be 30 meters higher, and there's no elevation advantage anywhere in this sector." That's when Anya revealed the second part of her plan. She'd identified an abandoned grain silo approximately 400 meters southeast of their current position. Climbing to its peak would provide the necessary elevation and angle, though it would also expose her to significant risk. The silo was in disputed territory, meaning enemy patrols occasionally swept the area. "You want to climb an unstable grain silo in enemy territory to attempt a shot that's never been successfully made," Victor summarized. "Yes," she replied simply. The night before her planned attempt, Anya received unexpected visitors in her dugout. 3 veteran snipers, Sergeants Mikhail, Boris, and Pavel, approached with serious expressions. "We've been talking," Mikhail began. "This obsession of yours with the column, it's affecting unit morale. The men think you're losing focus on real targets." Boris nodded agreement. "Yesterday, you passed up a clear shot at an enemy communications officer to study your precious bridge." Pavel leaned forward. "We respect your skills, Volkov, but this fantasy needs to stop. You're embarrassing yourself and making the sniper corps look foolish." Anya listened quietly, understanding their concerns but remaining committed to her plan. "Have any of you actually calculated the ballistics for the shot?" she asked. "It's impossible," Mikhail replied. "We don't need calculations to know that." "I've run the numbers 17 times, Anya said, pulling out a worn notebook filled with mathematical equations, wind speed recordings, and detailed sketches of the bridge structure. "The shot is difficult but not impossible," and if successful, it would eliminate the primary route for enemy supply convoys. The three veterans examined her calculations with growing surprise. Her mathematics were flawless, her observations detailed beyond anything they'd seen from younger soldiers. Still, the practical challenges seemed insurmountable. Even if your math is correct, Pavel said slowly, the risk is enormous. If you miss, enemy forces will know our general position. If you hit but fail to damage the bridge significantly, you'll have wasted ammunition and revealed our presence for nothing. And if I succeed? Anya asked. The question hung in the air. None of them had considered the possibility of success seriously enough to contemplate its strategic implications. A compromised bridge would force enemy convoys to use a longer route that passed through areas where other sniper teams could engage them effectively. That night, alone in her foxhole, Anya cleaned her rifle with methodical precision. Her weapon was a customized Mosin Nagant that had belonged to her grandfather, a veteran of World War II. She'd modified it extensively, adjusted the trigger pull, refined the barrel crown, and calibrated the scope to her exact shooting style. The rifle held special significance beyond its practical capabilities. Her grandfather had told stories of impossible shots during the siege of Leningrad, moments when mathematical precision and unwavering determination had overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. Sometimes, he'd told her as a child, the impossible shot is the only shot worth taking. As dawn approached, Anya made final preparations for her attempt. She studied weather reports, confirmed wind patterns, and reviewed her calculations one last time. The grain silo expedition would begin at 600 hours, during the narrow window when enemy patrols were transitioning between night and day shifts. Victor remained skeptical but loyal. If you're determined to try this, I'll spot for you, he said, but we need an extraction plan if things go wrong. They established emergency signals and evacuation routes. If enemy forces detected their position during the shot attempt, they would have approximately 3 minutes to reach cover before concentrated fire made escape impossible. The final element of Anya's preparation involved mental conditioning. Hitting the column required more than technical skill. It demanded absolute confidence and the ability to ignore doubt during the crucial seconds of target acquisition and trigger squeeze. She spent the hour before departure in meditation, visualizing every aspect of the shot sequence. At 5:45 hours, she shouldered her rifle and began moving toward the grain silo. The morning had arrived gray and still, with minimal wind and clear visibility. Weather conditions were optimal. Victor followed at a distance, carrying spotting equipment and extra ammunition. Both soldiers moved carefully through abandoned farmland, using drainage ditches and crop rows for concealment. The grain silo loomed ahead, its concrete structure scarred by months of warfare but still standing. Getting to the top would require climbing an external maintenance ladder that hadn't been inspected or maintained in years. As they reached the base of the silo, Victor whispered, "Last chance to reconsider." Anya looked up at the towering structure, then toward the bridge where the infamous column stood waiting. Today would determine whether months of preparation and calculation had value, or whether she was indeed chasing an impossible dream. "I'm going up," she said, beginning her ascent into history. The maintenance ladder felt unstable under Anya's weight as she climbed toward the top of the grain silo. Each rung required careful testing before she committed her full weight, and more than once she felt metal creak ominously beneath her boots. Victor watched from below, scanning the surrounding area for signs of enemy movement. 50 meters up, Anya paused to catch her breath and assess her progress. The rifle slung across her back felt heavier with each meter of altitude, but the view was already revealing new perspectives on the bridge and its controversial column. From this height, she could see details that had been invisible from ground level. The climbing continued for another 10 minutes before she reached a platform near the silo's peak. The structure offered an ideal firing position with clear sight lines to the target bridge, but it also left her completely exposed to observation from multiple directions. Any enemy patrol with binoculars would spot her instantly if they looked in the right direction. Victor's voice crackled through her radio earpiece. "Anya, I have movement to the northeast. Patrol of 4, approximately 600 meters and closing on our position." She checked her watch. The enemy patrol was ahead of schedule, which compressed her available shooting window significantly. According to her calculations, she had perhaps 15 minutes before the patrol reached a position where they might notice activity at the silo. "Copy that," she whispered back. "Beginning target assessment." Through her rifle scope, the bridge column appeared larger and more detailed than ever before. Her weeks of ground-level observation had been accurate. The structural weakness she'd identified was clearly visible from this elevated angle. A section of concrete approximately 30 centimeters square showed different coloration and texture, indicating a construction flaw that compromised the column's integrity. But identifying the target and successfully engaging it were entirely different challenges. The distance was extreme even for an expert marksman, and the required precision left virtually no margin for error. Miss the vulnerable section by even a few centimeters, and the shot would accomplish nothing except alerting enemies to her position. Wind conditions at this altitude were different from ground-level measurements. She felt gentle but consistent air movement that would affect bullet trajectory over the 800-meter distance to target. Anya pulled out a small powder dispenser and released a tiny amount to observe wind direction and approximate speed. The powder drift indicated wind moving from southwest to northeast at roughly 4 kilometers per hour, within acceptable parameters for the shot, but requiring compensation in her aiming calculations. "Victor, update on the patrol," she requested. "Still approaching, now at 400 meters. They're moving casually, no indication they've spotted us. But you need to shoot soon if you're going to shoot at all." Anya settled into her firing position on the platform. The grain silo's concrete surface was rough but stable, providing a solid rest for precise shooting. She deployed her bipod and adjusted the rifle's position until the sight picture felt perfect. Through the scope, she could see the column's vulnerable section with crystal clarity. The distance was significant, but her calculations indicated the shot was feasible with proper technique and favorable conditions. Everything depended on her ability to execute flawlessly under pressure. The first shot would be her only real opportunity. Miss, and enemy forces would immediately begin searching for the sniper's position. Even if she had time for follow-up shots, they would be firing from a compromised position with reduced chances of success. Breathing control became crucial. Anya regulated her respiratory pattern to minimize movement during the critical seconds of target engagement. Her heart rate had elevated during the climb, and she needed to allow it to return to normal before attempting the shot. "Patrol now at 300 meters, Victor reported. "Still no indication they've seen us, but they're definitely moving this direction." The time pressure was becoming intense, but rushing the shot would guarantee failure. Anya forced herself to maintain proper shooting fundamentals despite the approaching deadline. Her grandfather's training had emphasized patience even in dangerous situations. Sometimes the difference between success and catastrophe was taking an extra few seconds to ensure perfect technique. She aligned the crosshairs precisely on the column's weak point and began applying gradual pressure to the trigger. The shot had to be perfectly timed between heartbeats and during the natural pause in her breathing cycle. The rifle's report echoed across the countryside like thunder. Through the scope, Anya watched the armor-piercing round streak toward its target, visible as a faint distortion in the air. The bullet's flight time felt eternal, though in reality it lasted less than 2 seconds. Impact, the round struck exactly where she'd aimed, sending concrete fragments exploding from the column's surface. But the initial damage appeared minimal, just a crater in the concrete with no obvious structural compromise. "Did it work?" Victor's voice was tense with anticipation. Anya kept watching through her scope, searching for signs that the shot had achieved its intended effect. For several seconds, nothing seemed to change. The bridge remained intact, traffic continued crossing, and the column stood apparently undamaged. Then she noticed subtle movement. The column began developing a hairline crack that spread slowly upward from the impact point. The specialized round had indeed compromised the internal structure, and stress was beginning to propagate through the concrete. "Movement in the column," she reported quietly. "Crack formation proceeding as calculated." But the structural failure was happening too slowly. The approaching enemy patrol would reach their position before the column's collapse became obvious, and partial damage wouldn't justify the risks they'd taken. "Anya, the patrol is at 150 meters. We need to move now," Victor urged. She made a critical decision. Instead of immediately retreating, she chambered a second round and aimed for a point adjacent to her first impact. If she could create a second stress concentration in the concrete, the structural failure might accelerate dramatically. The second shot was even more challenging than the first. Enemy forces were close enough to hear the rifle's report clearly, and they would immediately begin searching for the source. She had perhaps 30 seconds before their position became untenable. Through her scope, she could see the crack from her first shot continuing to spread through the column's concrete. The second shot needed to intersect that crack system to create maximum structural damage. Anya adjusted her aim slightly and fired again. The second armor-piercing round struck within centimeters of her intended point, sending more concrete fragments flying and creating additional stress concentration in the column's damaged section. This time the effect was immediate and dramatic. The crack system spread rapidly through the concrete, and the entire column began to shift visibly. The structural integrity was failing exactly as her calculations had predicted. "Column is compromised," she announced into her radio, "beginning descent immediately." The climb down would be far more dangerous than the ascent. Enemy forces had definitely heard the shots and were actively searching for the sniper's position. Speed was essential, but a fall from this height would be fatal. Victor's voice was urgent. "Patrol is running toward our position. They know the shots came from this area." Anya descended as quickly as possible while maintaining safety. The maintenance ladder seemed even less stable now, perhaps weakened by vibrations from her shots or simply more noticeable due to her heightened awareness of danger. Halfway down, she heard shouting voices in a foreign language. The enemy patrol had spotted the grain silo and was moving to investigate. They were still several hundred meters away, but closing rapidly. "Victor, can you see the bridge?" she asked between ladder rungs. "Affirmative, the column is definitely moving. There's visible damage and—" "Holy shit, Anya, it's starting to collapse." She reached the ground just as the column's structural failure reached critical mass. Through gaps in the surrounding vegetation, she could see the massive concrete pillar beginning to tilt as its damaged section could no longer support the weight above. The collapse happened with surprising speed once it began. The column broke apart in large chunks that crashed into the river below, taking significant portions of the bridge deck with them. In less than a minute, the strategic crossing point that had served enemy forces for months was completely impassable. "Target destroyed," Anya reported with quiet satisfaction. "Bridge is down." But their immediate situation remained extremely dangerous. Enemy forces were converging on the silo from multiple directions, and escape routes were becoming limited as more patrols responded to the sound of gunfire and the bridge collapse. Victor had identified a drainage canal that offered concealed movement toward friendly lines, but reaching it required crossing 200 meters of open farmland, while enemy soldiers searched the area actively. They began moving immediately, using whatever cover was available in the abandoned agricultural landscape. Behind them, the voices of searching enemy soldiers grew closer as the patrol methodically examined the grain silo area. The destroyed bridge was already creating problems for enemy logistics. Radio communications indicated confusion and anger as military planners realized their primary supply route had been eliminated by a single sniper. Convoy schedules would need complete revision, and alternative routes passed through areas where other Ukrainian forces could engage them effectively. "Anya," Victor said as they crawled through a muddy furrow between crop rows, "I owe you an apology. I thought you were chasing an impossible dream. That was the most incredible shot I've ever witnessed." She smiled briefly, but remained focused on their escape. The hard part wasn't over yet. They still needed to reach friendly lines without being captured or killed by increasingly frustrated enemy forces. As they moved through the drainage canal, Anya reflected on the morning's events. Months of preparation, calculation, and determination had culminated in 2 precise shots that accomplished what everyone said was impossible. The infamous column that had protected enemy supply lines was now lying in fragments at the bottom of the river. But this was only the beginning. Word of her success would spread quickly through both friendly and enemy forces. Her reputation as a sniper would be forever changed, and the tactical implications of the bridge destruction would ripple through the entire regional conflict. The drainage canal led them safely through enemy search patterns, and toward the rendezvous point where extraction was possible. As they moved, radio chatter indicated growing chaos in enemy logistics, as the bridge collapse forced immediate changes to convoy routes and supply schedules. By the time they reached friendly lines, news of the bridge destruction had already reached their command structure. Colonel Petrov was waiting with an expression of amazement and respect that Anya had never seen before. "Sergeant Volkov," he said formally, "it appears I owe you a significant apology. Your impossible shot has eliminated one of our most problematic tactical challenges." The column that had defied every previous attempt now lay in ruins, and the young sniper who had insisted it could be defeated was beginning to build a legend that would inspire soldiers and terrify enemies for years to come. The command bunker buzzed with activity as news of the bridge collapse spread through military communications networks. Colonel Petrov studied satellite images of the destroyed crossing, while field commanders reported the immediate tactical advantages gained by eliminating the strategic route. "Convoy schedules have been completely disrupted," reported Major Kozlov. "Enemy forces are being forced to use the northern route, which adds 40 kilometers to their supply runs and passes through 3 areas where our forces can engage them effectively." Anya sat quietly in a corner of the bunker, still processing the magnitude of what she'd accomplished. The impossible shot had succeeded beyond her most optimistic calculations, but she was beginning to understand that success would bring new pressures and expectations. General Marchenko arrived by helicopter within hours of receiving the initial report. The regional commander rarely visited frontline positions personally, but the destruction of the strategic bridge warranted immediate attention from the highest levels of military leadership. "Sergeant Volkov," the general said upon entering the bunker, "I've come to meet the sniper who accomplished what our artillery couldn't manage in 3 months of bombardment." The attention felt overwhelming. Anya had expected professional recognition for destroying the bridge, but the level of interest from senior leadership suggested her achievement had implications far beyond the immediate tactical situation. General Marchenko studied detailed reports of the shooting incident while questioning Victor about the specific circumstances of the shots. The spotter provided technical details about wind conditions, distance calculations, and the precision required to hit the column's vulnerable section. "The ballistics analysis is remarkable," the general observed. "Your first shot created exactly the stress concentration needed to compromise the structure. The second shot accelerated the failure process perfectly. This level of precision suggests extensive preparation and mathematical calculation." Anya confirmed that she'd been studying the target for weeks, calculating trajectories and waiting for optimal conditions. Her notebook full of measurements and equations impressed the general and his technical advisors. "We've received intelligence reports that enemy forces are frantically searching for the sniper responsible," General Marchenko continued. "They can't believe a single shooter accomplished what they considered impossible. Your success has created significant psychological impact beyond the tactical advantage." The psychological warfare aspect hadn't occurred to Anya during her planning, but it made strategic sense. If enemy forces believed Ukrainian snipers could hit targets previously considered safe, they would need to adjust their entire approach to movement and logistics. Within days, her success began generating new operational requests. Field commanders who had dismissed her column theory now wanted her assessment of other seemingly impossible targets. Bridge supports, communication towers, and fortified positions that had been written off as invulnerable were suddenly being reconsidered. "I need you to examine this target," Colonel Petrov said, showing her reconnaissance photos of an enemy observation post built into a cliff face. "Intelligence says it's impossible to hit from any conceivable shooting position, but after your bridge success, I'm not accepting impossible anymore." The observation post presented entirely different challenges from the bridge column. The target was smaller, partially concealed, and protected by natural rock formations that blocked most shooting angles. But Anya's approach remained methodical, studying the target extensively before determining whether a shot was feasible. Her growing reputation created unexpected problems as well as opportunities. Other snipers in the regiment began seeking her advice on difficult shots, but some veteran marksmen resented the attention she was receiving. Sergeant Mikkel, who had been among her harshest critics, now made pointed comments about lucky beginners and impossible shots that can't be repeated. The tension came to a head during a unit meeting when Mikkel directly challenged her technical abilities. "Anyone can get lucky once," he said loudly enough for other soldiers to hear. "Real snipers prove their skills consistently over time." Anya understood his frustration. Veterans with years of combat experience found it difficult to accept that a relatively inexperienced soldier had accomplished something they'd considered impossible. But she also recognized the need to establish her credibility within the sniper community. "Would you like to test that theory?" she asked quietly. The challenge was accepted immediately. Mikkel proposed a shooting competition using standard military targets at various ranges, with other unit snipers serving as judges. The contest would settle questions about her abilities and determine whether the bridge shot represented genuine skill or extraordinary luck. News of the competition spread quickly through the regiment. Soldiers placed informal bets on the outcome, while senior officers debated whether allowing the contest was appropriate given the current tactical situation. Colonel Petrov ultimately approved the shooting match, recognizing its value for unit morale and cohesion. The competition took place on a makeshift range, established in a secure valley behind friendly lines. 5 targets were positioned at distances from 300 to 800 meters, with varying difficulty levels including wind exposure and partial concealment. Mikkel shot first, demonstrating the steady accuracy that had earned his reputation as one of the regiment's best marksmen. His groupings were tight and consistent, with 4 of 5 shots hitting center mass on their respective targets. When Anya's turn came, she approached each target with the same methodical precision she'd used for the bridge column. Wind readings, trajectory calculations, and careful breathing control preceded every shot. Her results matched Mikkel's accuracy at shorter ranges and exceeded it at longer distances. The final target was positioned at 800 meters, the same distance as her famous bridge shot. This target was smaller than the column's vulnerable section and partially obscured by vegetation, making it significantly more challenging than her previous success. "If you can hit that target consistently," Mikkel said, "I'll acknowledge your skills publicly." Anya studied the distant target through her scope, calculating the precise adjustments needed for wind and elevation. The shot required the same level of precision that had destroyed the bridge, but without the luxury of extensive preparation time. Her first shot struck the target's outer ring, a respectable hit, but not the precision she'd demonstrated previously. The second shot moved closer to center, and the third achieved a perfect bullseye that silenced all doubts about her abilities. Mikkel examined the target personally before making his announcement. "Sergeant Volkov has demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills," he told the assembled soldiers. "Her success with the bridge column was not luck, but the result of superior preparation and shooting ability." The public acknowledgement from a respected veteran eliminated remaining questions about Anya's credibility within the sniper community. More importantly, it established her as a resource for solving tactical problems that required extreme precision shooting. General Marchenko had been monitoring the competition's results through field reports. The consistent accuracy under pressure confirmed his assessment that Anya represented a valuable strategic asset whose capabilities extended far beyond the single bridge success. "We need to consider how best to utilize Sergeant Volkov's abilities," he told Colonel Petrov during a secure communication session. "Her precision shooting could be decisive for several high-priority targets that have been problematic for conventional approaches." The list of potential targets included communication facilities, ammunition depots, and command bunkers that enemy forces considered safe due to their locations and defensive measures. Each target would require the same combination of mathematical precision and technical skill that had destroyed the bridge column. But increased visibility brought new dangers as well as opportunities. Enemy intelligence services were actively searching for the sniper responsible for the bridge attack, and her growing reputation made her a high-value target for elimination efforts. Security protocols around Anya's movements became significantly stricter. She could no longer operate with just Victor as support. Every mission now required additional personnel for protection and extraction assistance. The independence she'd valued as a sniper was being replaced by the constraints of high-profile military assignments. The psychological pressure was also becoming noticeable. Every shot was now scrutinized by senior officers who expected results matching her bridge success. The freedom to attempt difficult shots without fear of criticism had been replaced by expectations that bordered on impossible. "I know the pressure is intense," Victor told her during a quiet moment between missions. "Everyone expects you to repeat miracles on demand, but remember that your success came from careful preparation and mathematical precision, not magic. Those fundamentals haven't changed." His reminder helped Anya maintain perspective on her situation. The bridge shot had succeeded because of methodical planning and flawless execution, not supernatural abilities. Future successes would depend on the same disciplined approach that had made the impossible shot possible. Late that evening, alone in her quarters, Anya cleaned her rifle and reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since the morning she climbed the grain silo. The weapon that had been her grandfather's legacy was now famous throughout the military for accomplishing what everyone said couldn't be done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new targets that others considered impossible. The column that had defied everyone for months now lay in fragments, but more importantly, the mindset that declared certain shots impossible had been permanently altered. Word was spreading through enemy forces as well. Intelligence reports indicated that sniper protection protocols were being revised, movement patterns were changing, and previously secure positions were being reconsidered. The psychological impact of one impossible shot was rippling through the entire conflict. As she prepared for sleep, Anya understood that her war had fundamentally changed. The quiet, methodical approach to impossible targets would continue, but now every shot carried the weight of reputation and the expectations of commanders who had seen what precision marksmanship could accomplish when mathematics and determination combined. The impossible shot had become possible, and that possibility would reshape how both sides approached the strategic challenges that lay ahead. 3 weeks after the bridge collapse, intelligence reports arrived that would test Anya's abilities in ways she had never imagined. Enemy forces had constructed a new command bunker deep within a mountain complex, believing it was completely secure from conventional attack methods. The facility coordinated supply operations for an entire sector and had become critical to enemy logistics. "The bunker is built into solid rock," Colonel Petrov explained, showing her detailed reconnaissance photographs. "Traditional artillery can't touch it, and airstrikes are impossible due to air defense coverage. But there's a ventilation shaft that might be vulnerable to precision shooting." The technical challenge was staggering. The ventilation shaft was only 40 centimeters in diameter and positioned on a cliff face 850 meters from the nearest conceivable shooting position. Even more challenging, the shaft was angled downward into the mountain, requiring a shot that would travel through the opening and strike critical equipment inside the facility. "The intelligence is specific," continued the colonel. "The main communications array is positioned directly below the ventilation shaft at a distance of approximately 15 meters inside the mountain. If that equipment could be destroyed, the entire command structure would be paralyzed." Anya studied the photographs with growing appreciation for the complexity of the proposed shot. Success would require hitting a target she couldn't see, through an opening barely larger than her rifle barrel, at a distance that tested the limits of practical marksmanship. "Have you calculated the trajectory requirements?" she asked. "Our technical advisors say it's mathematically impossible," Colonel Petrov admitted. "The angle required to enter the shaft and hit the equipment inside exceeds what any rifle can achieve. But after your bridge success, the general specifically requested your assessment." The mathematical analysis took 3 days of intensive calculation. Anya needed to determine whether there was any shooting position that could provide the necessary angle while remaining within effective range of her rifle. Traditional ballistics said no, but she'd learned that traditional assumptions often overlooked creative possibilities. Working with expanded topographical maps, she identified a potential solution that seemed almost absurd in its complexity. There was a radio tower approximately 2 kilometers from the target bunker that, if she could reach its peak, would provide the steep downward angle necessary for the shot. "You want to climb a radio tower that's in contested territory to attempt a shot through a hole you can barely see at a target you can't see." Victor summarized her proposal. "The mathematics work," she replied simply. From the tower's peak, I can achieve the required trajectory angle. The shot is difficult but not impossible. General Marchenko reviewed her calculations personally before approving the mission. The strategic value of eliminating the command bunker justified extraordinary risks, and Anya's bridge success had earned her the right to attempt shots others considered impossible. Mission planning took another week. The radio tower was located in a zone where enemy and friendly forces contested control daily. Reaching it would require movement through dangerous territory, and the climb itself would expose her to observation from multiple directions. The team was expanded to include 6 additional soldiers for security and extraction support. Victor would spot for the actual shot, while the security team established a defensive perimeter and monitored for enemy response to the tower infiltration. Equipment selection was critical. The shot's extreme angle and distance required specialized ammunition and precise rifle adjustments. Anya selected match-grade armor-piercing rounds and modified her scope mounting to accommodate the steep downward trajectory. The approach to the radio tower began before dawn on a gray November morning. The team moved through abandoned villages and overgrown farmland, using covered routes that avoided known enemy patrol areas. Progress was slow and methodical, with frequent stops to assess potential threats. The tower rose 40 meters above the surrounding countryside, its metal framework scarred by months of warfare but still structurally sound. Climbing it would take approximately 15 minutes and leave Anya completely exposed during the ascent and shooting phase. Radio chatter indicates enemy patrol activity in this sector, reported Sergeant Kowalski, the team leader for the security element. We have a narrow window before the next scheduled sweep. Anya began climbing immediately. The tower's metal ladder was solid but extremely exposed, offering no concealment from observation. Each rung brought her higher above the surrounding terrain while making her more visible to potential enemy spotters. Halfway up the tower, she paused to catch her breath and assess the view toward the target bunker. Through her scope, she could just make out the ventilation shaft opening in the distant cliff face. From this height and angle, the shot was beginning to look feasible. The climb continued until she reached the tower's peak, where communication equipment provided some concealment for her shooting position. The view toward the bunker was clear, and the downward angle was exactly what her calculations had predicted. "Victor, can you see the target?" she asked through her radio. "Affirmative. I have the ventilation shaft in sight. Wind conditions are favorable, approximately 3 kilometers per hour from the northwest." Anya settled into her shooting position and began the complex process of adjusting her scope for the extreme trajectory required. The shot would arc high above the landscape before diving down through the ventilation shaft and into the bunker's interior. Through her scope, the ventilation opening appeared as a dark circle against the gray rock face. The target was small enough that her crosshairs almost completely covered it, leaving virtually no room for aiming error. The mathematical precision required was beyond anything she'd attempted previously. Miss the opening by a few centimeters, and the bullet would strike solid rock. Miss the trajectory angle slightly, and the round would hit the shaft's walls instead of traveling into the bunker's interior. "Enemy patrol approaching from the southeast," Sergeant Kowalski reported. "Distance approximately 800 meters. You have perhaps 10 minutes before they reach a position where they might spot us." Time pressure was becoming a factor, but rushing the shot would guarantee failure. Anya forced herself to maintain proper shooting fundamentals despite the approaching deadline. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Patience under pressure separates true marksmen from those who merely shoot well under ideal conditions." She aligned her crosshairs precisely on the center of the ventilation opening and began applying gradual pressure to the trigger. The shot had to be timed perfectly during her natural breathing cycle and between heartbeats to minimize movement. The rifle's report echoed across the valley as the armor-piercing round streaked toward its target. Through her scope, Anya watched the bullet's trajectory with intense concentration, tracking its path toward the distant opening. Impact. The round disappeared into the ventilation shaft exactly as calculated, leaving no visible trace on the surrounding rock face. But whether it had successfully traveled down the shaft and struck the communications equipment remained unknown. "Did it work?" Victor asked tensely. For several minutes, nothing seemed to change. Enemy radio communications continued normally, and there were no obvious signs that the command bunker had been compromised. Anya began to wonder whether her calculations had been wrong or whether the equipment damage was insufficient to disable communications. Then radio intercepts began indicating problems with enemy command communications. Field units were reporting inability to contact the mountain bunker, and backup communication protocols were being activated throughout the sector. Communications blackout confirmed in the target sector, Victor reported with excitement. Enemy units are switching to backup frequencies and requesting relay support from adjacent commands. The shot had succeeded perfectly. The armor-piercing round had traveled through the ventilation shaft, struck the communications array, and disabled the entire command structure exactly as intelligence had predicted. "Target eliminated," Anya announced quietly, beginning immediate descent. The climb down was faster than the ascent, but far more dangerous. Enemy forces had detected the communications failure and were beginning search operations to locate the source of the attack. Multiple patrols were converging on the radio tower area. Sergeant Kowalski's security team provided covering fire as enemy scouts approached their position. The extraction had become a fighting withdrawal through contested territory with multiple hostile forces seeking to capture or eliminate the sniper responsible for disabling the command bunker. "Move, move, move," Kowalski shouted as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions. "They know we're here." The team fought their way through increasingly dense enemy resistance as word spread of the communications attack. Radio intercepts indicated that enemy commanders had correctly identified the radio tower as the shooting position and were directing significant resources toward capturing the sniper team. Running battles continued for 3 hours as the team moved through valleys and forests toward friendly lines. Enemy forces had committed substantial personnel to the pursuit, indicating the strategic importance of the destroyed communications center. Victor stayed close to Anya throughout the extraction, providing security while she carried the rifle that had accomplished another impossible shot. The weapon had now disabled 2 critical enemy assets that conventional forces couldn't touch. "Anya," he said during a brief pause in cover, "that shot through the ventilation shaft. I've never seen anything like it. The precision required was beyond what I thought possible with small arms." She nodded acknowledgement but remained focused on the continuing extraction. The hard part wasn't over yet. They still needed to reach friendly territory before enemy forces could coordinate an effective blocking action. The pursuit continued until nightfall when the team finally crossed into secure areas defended by friendly forces. Behind them, enemy communications remained disrupted as technical teams struggled to repair or replace the destroyed equipment in the mountain bunker. General Marchenko was waiting at the extraction point with an expression of amazement and professional respect. "Sergeant Volkov," he said formally, "you have once again accomplished what our technical experts considered impossible. The entire enemy command structure for this sector has been paralyzed." Intelligence reports in the following days revealed the full impact of the communications attack. Enemy operations throughout the region were severely degraded as commanders struggled to coordinate activities without their primary communication hub. Supply convoys were delayed, troop movements became uncoordinated, and tactical flexibility was greatly reduced. The psychological impact was even greater than the tactical advantage. Enemy forces now understood that no position was truly safe from Ukrainian snipers, regardless of how impossible the target seemed. The woman who had destroyed the bridge column was now hitting targets inside mountain bunkers that were supposed to be completely secure. As news of the second impossible shot spread through military channels, Anya realized that her war was evolving again. Each success raised the bar for future assignments, and commanders were beginning to view her as a solution for any precision shooting challenge, regardless of difficulty. The rifle that had belonged to her grandfather was becoming legendary throughout the military for accomplishing feats that redefined what was possible with precision marksmanship. But with that reputation came pressure to continue achieving miracles on demand. That night, alone in her quarters, Anya cleaned her weapon and prepared for whatever impossible shot would come next. The ventilation shaft that everyone said couldn't be hit was now the entry point for a round that had paralyzed an entire enemy command structure. Two impossible shots had become possible through mathematical precision and unwavering determination. The pattern was established. When others saw impossibility, she saw a mathematical problem that could be solved through careful calculation and flawless execution. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new targets that conventional wisdom declared invulnerable. But conventional wisdom had been wrong twice now, and Anya was beginning to understand that impossible was often just another word for difficult. 6 months later, Anya's reputation had spread far beyond her immediate military unit. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces had developed specific countermeasures designed to prevent the kind of precision attacks she'd pioneered. The woman they called Ghost Shot had become a strategic concern at the highest levels of enemy planning. "They're moving critical facilities underground," General Marchenko explained during a secure briefing. "Communication centers, supply depots, command bunkers, everything is being relocated to positions they believe are immune to sniper attack." The new defensive measures presented both challenges and opportunities. Enemy forces were expending enormous resources on protective construction that reduced their operational flexibility, while still potentially remaining vulnerable to creative approaches. "There's one target in particular that has become a priority," the general continued. "Intelligence has identified a new ammunition depot built into a natural cave system. It supplies 3 sectors and contains enough ordnance to affect the entire regional conflict. But the facility appears to be genuinely impossible to attack conventionally." Anya studied the reconnaissance photographs with professional interest. The cave entrance was narrow and defended by multiple layers of security. More significantly, the ammunition storage areas were located deep within the cave system, protected by hundreds of meters of solid rock. "What makes this target theoretically vulnerable?" she asked. "Geological surveys indicate that the cave has a natural chimney formation that extends to the surface approximately 600 meters above the main storage chamber," General Marchenko explained. "The opening is concealed by vegetation and has a diameter of roughly 20 centimeters. The proposed shot was even more challenging than the ventilation shaft attack. The target was deeper underground, the access opening was smaller, and the trajectory calculations would be incredibly complex due to the irregular shape of the natural chimney. Our technical experts say it's absolutely impossible," Colonel Petrov added. "The bullet would need to travel through a winding passage, maintain enough velocity to penetrate the storage chamber, and strike sensitive ordnance with sufficient force to trigger a sympathetic detonation." Anya examined detailed cave surveys and geological reports while considering the mathematical requirements for the shot. The natural chimney wasn't straight. It curved and twisted as it descended through the rock formation, making trajectory prediction extremely difficult. "I need 3 weeks to study this target," she told the assembled officers. "The shot may be possible, but it will require extensive preparation and specialized equipment." The preparation phase was unlike anything she'd undertaken previously. Working with munitions experts, she developed a special round that would maintain stability through the irregular cave passage, while retaining enough explosive potential to trigger the ammunition depot's destruction. Geological consultants provided detailed analysis of the cave's internal structure, helping her understand how sound and concussion would propagate through the confined space. The right shot in the right location could potentially trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire facility. Studying the surface terrain above the cave revealed another significant challenge. The concealed opening was located on a steep hillside with no nearby elevation advantage. Creating the necessary downward angle would require an even more creative approach than previous missions. "There's an abandoned monastery on the ridge opposite the cave system," Victor observed during reconnaissance planning. "The bell tower would provide the height and angle we need, but it's 1,200 meters from the target, beyond the effective range for this type of precision work." 1,200 meters was indeed at the extreme limit of what was possible with small arms, especially considering the precision required to hit such a small opening. But Anya's calculations suggested the shot was theoretically feasible with perfect conditions and flawless execution. "The distance is manageable," she decided, "but everything else will need to be perfect: weather, equipment, timing, and execution. There's no margin for error at that range." Mission planning took 2 weeks and involved coordination with weather specialists, ballistics experts, and intelligence analysts. The shot would require perfect atmospheric conditions and precise timing to maximize the chances of triggering the ammunition depot's destruction. The monastery had been abandoned for decades, but remained structurally sound. Its bell tower rose 30 meters above the surrounding ridge, providing an ideal platform for the extreme-range shot. However, the location was in disputed territory where both sides conducted irregular patrols. Team composition was expanded to include 12 soldiers for security and extraction support. The complexity of the mission and the strategic importance of the target justified substantial resource allocation. Victor would spot for the shot, while technical specialists monitored atmospheric conditions and communication equipment. Equipment preparation involved custom modifications to her rifle and scope system. The extreme range required adjustments that pushed her weapon beyond normal operational parameters. Specialized ammunition was hand-loaded to exact specifications for optimal performance at 1,200 meters. The approach to the monastery began at midnight during a period of optimal weather conditions. Cloud cover provided concealment, while atmospheric pressure and wind patterns were ideal for long-range shooting. The team moved through mountain terrain using routes that avoided known patrol areas. The monastery bell tower felt stable despite its age, providing a solid platform for precision shooting. From the peak, Anya could see across the valley to the hillside where the concealed cave opening was located. Through her scope, the target area appeared as a small irregularity in the vegetation. "Target area is visible," she reported to Victor, beginning final preparations for the shot. The technical complexity of the shot required nearly an hour of preparation. Atmospheric readings, trajectory calculations, and equipment adjustments had to be perfect before she could attempt to hit such a small target at such extreme range. "Wind conditions are optimal," Victor reported. "Atmospheric pressure is stable. All conditions are as favorable as we can expect." Through her scope, Anya could barely discern the cave opening among the vegetation and rock formations. The target was so small and distant that her crosshairs seemed to cover the entire area. Success would depend on mathematical precision and the specialized round's ability to navigate the complex cave passage. Enemy patrol activity in the valley below added urgency to the mission timeline. Radio intercepts indicated that security sweeps were being conducted near both the cave facility and the abandoned monastery. The shooting window was narrowing rapidly. "Enemy movement detected," reported Sergeant Martinez, who was monitoring the security perimeter. "Patrol approaching the monastery from the northeast, distance approximately 400 meters. Time was running out, but the shot couldn't be rushed. Anya forced herself to maintain proper shooting fundamentals despite the approaching deadline. The extreme range and tiny target demanded absolute precision that could only be achieved through patient, methodical technique. She aligned her crosshairs on the estimated position of the cave opening and began applying gradual pressure to the trigger. The shot had to be timed perfectly during her breathing cycle and between heartbeats to minimize any movement that could affect accuracy. The rifle's report echoed across the valley as the specialized round began its journey toward the distant target. At 1,200 meters, the bullet's flight time was significant enough that she could track its trajectory through her scope. Impact was impossible to observe directly due to the distance and concealment of the cave opening. For several minutes after the shot, nothing seemed to change in the target area. Enemy patrols continued their normal activities, and there were no obvious signs that anything had occurred. Then the ground began to tremble. The sympathetic detonation started deep within the cave system and propagated upward through the rock formation. Within seconds, the entire hillside was shaking as stored ammunition exploded in a chain reaction that exceeded all predictions. Massive explosions erupted from multiple points on the hillside as the ammunition depot's destruction triggered secondary detonations throughout the cave system. Smoke and debris rose hundreds of meters into the air as months of accumulated ordnance was consumed in minutes. "Target destroyed," Anya announced with quiet satisfaction, beginning immediate extraction. The explosion's magnitude was visible from dozens of kilometers away and created seismic effects that registered on monitoring equipment throughout the region. Enemy communications erupted with confusion and alarm as commanders struggled to understand what had happened to their most secure ammunition facility. The extraction was complicated by enemy forces converging on both the explosion site and the monastery area. Multiple patrols were searching for the source of the attack, while rescue teams attempted to assess damage at the destroyed facility. Every enemy unit in the sector is mobilizing, Victor observed as they descended from the bell tower. They know the ammunition depot was attacked, but they can't figure out how it was possible. The team fought running battles throughout the day as enemy forces desperately searched for the sniper responsible for destroying their critical ammunition stockpile. The explosion had eliminated ordnance supplies for 3 sectors, creating immediate logistical problems that would affect enemy operations for months. Radio intercepts revealed the psychological impact of the attack. Enemy commanders were struggling to accept that a single sniper had destroyed a facility buried deep underground in a natural cave system. The impossibility of the attack was creating paranoia about Ukrainian capabilities. They're questioning the security of every facility they considered impregnable, General Marchenko observed during the mission debrief. Your success has forced them to reconsider fundamental assumptions about what can be protected from sniper attack. Intelligence reports in the following weeks revealed the strategic implications of the ammunition depot's destruction. Enemy operations throughout the region were severely constrained by ordnance shortages, and alternative supply routes were inadequate to meet operational requirements. The psychological warfare aspect was proving as valuable as the tactical advantage. Enemy forces were expending enormous resources on additional security measures for facilities they'd previously considered completely safe from conventional attack. You've accomplished something unprecedented, General Marchenko told Anya during a formal recognition ceremony. 35 confirmed strategic targets eliminated through precision marksmanship. Targets that conventional forces couldn't touch, you've destroyed with individual rifle shots. The number 35 included the bridge column, communication bunkers, supply depots, observation posts, and command facilities that had been eliminated through impossible shots over 6 months of operations. Each target had been declared invulnerable by experts before falling to mathematical precision and unwavering determination. Sergeant Volkov, the general continued, your success has revolutionized our approach to strategic targeting. You've proven that with proper preparation and exceptional skill, no target is truly impossible to hit. The rifle that had belonged to her grandfather was now displayed in the command bunker as a symbol of what Ukrainian forces could accomplish through innovation and determination. The weapon had destroyed more strategic targets than entire artillery battalions while using only individual rounds. Enemy propaganda broadcasts had begun referring to her as the phantom sniper who strikes from impossible distances. Intelligence reports indicated that her reputation was affecting enemy morale and forcing costly changes to defensive strategies throughout the region. That evening, alone with Victor and her thoughts, Anya reflected on the journey from the grain silo to the monastery bell tower. The column that had defied everyone for months had been the beginning of a campaign that redefined what was possible in precision warfare. 35 confirmed kills, Victor said quietly. Targets that everyone said couldn't be hit. Bridge columns, ventilation shafts, cave openings. You've proven that impossible is just another word for challenging. She cleaned her grandfather's rifle with methodical precision, the same ritual she'd performed after every successful mission. The weapon had earned a reputation that would outlive the conflict, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that mathematical precision and unwavering determination could overcome any defensive measure. The war continued, and there would be more impossible targets in the days ahead. Enemy forces would continue developing new defenses that they believed made their facilities invulnerable to attack. But they had learned, perhaps too late, that declaring something impossible didn't make it so. The woman who had climbed a grain silo to hit a bridge column had become a legend throughout the military and a nightmare for enemy planners. 35 confirmed kills of targets everyone said couldn't be hit, proof that sometimes the impossible shot is the only shot worth taking. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new targets that conventional wisdom declared safe from attack. But conventional wisdom had been wrong 35 times now, and Anya was beginning to understand that the only truly impossible shot was the one never attempted. The column that had started it all lay in fragments at the bottom of a river, but its legacy continued through every impossible shot that followed. They had said no one could hit that column. She had proven them wrong with 35 confirmed kills that redefined the meaning of impossible.